It's a great pleasure to introduce our guests today, Dr. Stacey Fox, one of the country's leading researchers on the importance of early childhood learning in terms of setting a child on the best path possible to a future life. And she's joined, of course, by her colleague from the University of New South Wales, Professor Adrian Piccoli, the Director of the Gonski Institute for Education and the former Minister for Education and Early Childhood in New South Wales. While there has been considerable improvement in the quality, scope and coverage of early childhood learning in Australia over the past decade, by international standards we are lagging many other developed countries, and there's still a lot more to do. So what does need to be done? Well, to talk about that and to launch the Launch into Learning campaign on behalf of the Early Learning and Care Council of Australia, would you please welcome our guests, Professor Adrian Piccoli and Dr. Stacey Fox.
Thank you all for coming. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we meet today on the lands of the Ngunnawal people and to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'm here at the start of the Launch into Learning campaign to set out the evidence for why 2 years of high quality early childhood education is vital for Australian children and for Australia. I'm the research manager at the Front Project, an independent national enterprise focused on creating better outcomes for Australian children and society. And I'm honoured to be speaking alongside Adrian Piccoli. I am hugely passionate about the extraordinary capabilities and the huge potential of our children. And alongside my colleagues at the Front Project and everyone here today, I am committed to an Australia where every child can thrive and help build the prosperity of our country. Today I want to show you why early childhood education is a fundamental building block of a society that gives every child a great start, and why 2 years of high quality early learning before school can make a real difference to a child's whole life. Australia is one of the few developed countries in the world that only provides 1 year of funded early learning to all of its children. Others, including Europe, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, China, South Korea, already provide at least 2 years of high quality early learning. And they do this because they know it makes a real difference to children, to the adults that they will become, to the communities that they will grow up in. Throughout history, all societies, all families have wanted the best for their children. But in the past 20 years, we've learned 3 big things that mark early childhood education as one of the most significant opportunities that any child can have. These 3 things are firstly the transformational discoveries that neuroscientists have made about how our brains grow and develop. Secondly, there's the start of the next industrial revolution, a fundamental change in our economy that is demanding new skills and new capabilities. And finally, there is a growing recognition of the persistent lifelong impacts of early disadvantage, and recognition that in the past few decades, Australia hasn't really shifted the dial for the children who grow up in disadvantage. And I'll discuss each of these in turn. The past 20 years has seen an explosion of research on how brains develop and a wholesale rethinking of how children learn. Thanks to the pioneering work of the neuroscientists, psychologists, biologists and economists who formed the National Scientific Council on the Developing Child in the United States. We now know that in the first 5 years, children learn more and learn faster than at any other time in their lives. And children's unparalleled capacity for learning is built into their biology. In the first 1,000 days of life, a child is forming 1 to 2 million neural connections every second. And it's the strength and the diversity of those connections that shape the fundamental architecture of their brains and build the foundation for all future learning. And these neural pathways are literally shaped by what happens in a child's life. And the pathways that grow the strongest are the ones that are most often repeated. That's why it's essential for children to go through the process of exploring, discovering, practicing, repeating and mastering new skills. Whether that's climbing stairs, learning to navigate group dynamics, putting a jigsaw puzzle together, or figuring out how to tell a story. And there's a really exciting window between the ages of 3 and 5. It's a really important window in a child's development. In these years, a child's language is blossoming. They are forming new and more complex relationships with others, and they're both insatiably curious and gradually becoming more organised and focused in their thinking. It's in this window that a child's brain is ready to develop new abilities, like holding on to and working with information, like taking an idea or a skill and applying it in a new context, how to focus on an activity, filter out distractions and control their impulses. It's when they begin to manage their emotions and start to understand cause and effect and ask why. In other words, it's when they learn to be curious, creative, persistent, collaborative problem solvers. And by the age of 5, a child's brain has reached 90% of its total growth. In these first 5 years, the experiences that a child has will either open up its potential or hold it back. And this revolution in neuroscience coincided with a fresh wave of research about the impact of early childhood education. This research showed that when it's high quality, early learning accelerates the growth of all of these skills. Quality early childhood education programs focus on all of the skills that 3 and 4-year-old brains are primed to learn. And skilled early childhood teachers and educators create learning environments and opportunities that help children try, practice and consolidate those skills. They enable and encourage children to get along with others, to show empathy, to listen and communicate well, to be motivated and self-confident, to pay attention, to persevere in challenging tasks, to follow rules and to solve problems. Skilled educators create environments that work with the extraordinary curiosity and love of learning that all children bring, and they build their confidence as little investigators and scientists. But these skills are particularly important when we think of the economy and the workforce that our young children will enter, that our young adults are entering today. At this year's World Economic Forum, there was long discussion about how our emergent economy will be built on complex problem solving, on critical thinking and creativity, collaboration, emotional intelligence, and good judgment. Exactly the skills that have their foundations in the early years. And demand for such skilled and flexible workers is only going to grow, especially when we don't know what jobs people will be doing in 10 years, let alone in 2040, when the 3-year-olds of today are entering the workforce. In these exciting times of rapid change, a love of learning and an ability to adapt are the most important attributes that we can cultivate and instill in our young people. We now have a much greater understanding of the opportunity that we have in the early years to instill that love of learning in all children. The opportunity to grow and enhance these core skills and to create the conditions that allow all children to reach their potential. We also have a sharper understanding of the risks that we take by not seizing this opportunity. Research in Australia and around the world shows that children who get a good start, children who start school behind often struggle to catch up. They're less likely to get a good job and are more likely to have poor health, be on welfare, and be involved in crime. In Australia, more than 60,000 children start school each year experiencing really significant barriers to learning. That's 1 in 5 in every prep class. And for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, it's 2 in 5. Victorian analysis shows that a child that starts school with significant language vulnerabilities is 5 times less likely to score in the top 2 bands of NAPLAN. This is hugely important because language and communication are such powerful predictors of how a child will progress through life. UK research shows that children with poor language skills at age 5 are 4 times as likely as other children to have reading difficulties through life. They're 3 times as likely to have mental health problems, and they're twice as likely to be unemployed when they reach adulthood. And this hurts not only the individual, their health, well-being and wealth as adults, their confidence and self-esteem throughout their lives. It also hurts the nation, the strength and size of our workforce and tax base, the inclusiveness, fairness and happiness of our society. This is why at the Front Project we ask business and community leaders to be bold advocates for the early years, because we know that when children have a good start in life and the opportunity to develop early all of the skills that we've identified, they're more likely to have financial security and to report good mental health and well-being as adults. Now, we used to think that school was the great equaliser, but these gaps do not close when we start school, and in fact they grow bigger. We need to close these gaps, and 2 years of high quality early childhood education is one of the best strategies that we have for doing so. It's time for Australia to build on the international evidence and ensure that we introduce a high quality early childhood education system that really enables all children to progress right from the start. We know that Australia's current early childhood education system isn't sufficiently equitable. Currently, the children who stand to benefit most, who have the greatest need, have the least access to high quality early childhood education. The 2016 E4Kids study, which is Australia's largest research project on early childhood education, found that only 7% of children in low-income families had access to the highest quality teaching, compared to 30% for the children from higher income families. That's why we need to focus not only on the quantity, but on the quality of early childhood education, and on ensuring that we have a system that can demonstrate how it's helping all children to progress. By building on the foundation of Australia's National Quality Framework, we have the opportunity to make sure that every single local early childhood education service is exceptional. And a world-class system like this requires teachers and educators who are well-trained, well-paid, and have access to the same kinds of professional learning opportunities as school-based teachers. We need more regular and responsive monitoring of quality, and the tools and accountability needed to drive continuous improvement, to track children's progress and show impact. And we need a funding model that drives quality, ensuring that there are enough resources for every child to receive the support that they need to thrive. And if I may end on a personal note, I remember that my very first social policy job here in Canberra, down the road in Tuggeranong, at the old Department of Families, Housing, Community Services and Indigenous Affairs, I encountered for the first time the statistics of what happens to children who grow up in poverty. How early experiences of disadvantage lock so many children into a trajectory of poor health, low achievement, low income and low opportunity. The stats on outcomes for children of teenage parents was particularly chilling for me. I'm the child of a young mum who raised me herself and gave me every opportunity that she could. In the decades since then, I've worked across health, social services and education policy, looking at the many ways that government can improve the lives of ordinary people. And having worked across all of these areas, having read an awful lot of research and evidence on what makes children and adults thrive, I come back time and time again to the potential of a world-class, high-quality early education system. It's why I work at the Front Project, and it's why all of us at the Front Project and everybody represented here today believe that providing all children with the opportunity for 2 years of high-quality early childhood education would be a historic reform and an unparalleled opportunity to invest in the next generation and in the future of Australia. Thank you.
Let's see now from Adrian Pickle.
Thank you very much, Laurie, to Dr. Elizabeth Deep, who I know very well from our previous work experience when I was a minister. Elizabeth worked in my office for some time, so quite a connection with Elizabeth. So thank you very much, Elizabeth, for inviting me to participate today. And to you, Stacey, I think children in Australia are well served by academics such as yourself and the work that you do in truly understanding the benefits of early childhood and being such a strong and passionate advocate. When I was asked to participate in today's Launch Into Learning campaign, I was very pleased to, for several reasons, and one of those is to provide a political context around this campaign. Many areas of reform have been self-evident, but it's navigating that political process that has inhibited many of those great reforms. So it's very interesting to be part of this and to lend my perspective. Having served as the New South Wales Minister for Education for 6 years and 4 years as the Minister for Early Childhood, I got to see from very close the fundamental benefits that accrue to children, their parents, the community, and the economy for that matter, when children get access to a high quality early childhood education and care. I saw it from a policy perspective, but also got to see it from a personal perspective, because my two children were both attending long day care and preschool during my time as Minister. And I got to walk into those services, not every day, given how often I was away, but I got to walk into those services and talk to those teachers and centre managers and staff about the value of early childhood and about what they were doing. And to be able to witness it firsthand, and then walk into a minister's office where you have all of those benefits and opportunities as a policy maker. But I also saw, however, and particularly representing a very large electorate in far western New South Wales, I also saw that that opportunity could not be seized by every child for reason of cost, for cultural reasons, for transport reasons, and for other highly valid reasons. And I remember one time in Condobolin being told by an early childhood provider that some parents didn't send their children because they were concerned if the child turned up with even a bruise, that they would be reported to family and community services. And as a result, made the decision not to send their children. So there are lots of significant and, I'd say, very valid reasons why children can't access. I also saw the data showing that children without that access, particularly from disadvantaged cohorts, did not perform as well at school, and they do not catch up, as Stacey has said. I'm also compelled to be involved in this campaign because of the equity issues that a lack of access to early childhood raises for us as a nation. As the director of the Gonski Institute for Education, we are committed to our mission of fixing equity in Australia. Now that's a very ambitious objective for which achieving it might well be deemed impossible. But any movement we make towards greater equity is surely a great achievement in itself. So not only are we at the Gonski Institute committed to equity because it's the right thing to do for educational purposes, but also because of the long-term social, economic and political threats we can see manifesting themselves where equity is getting worse, not better. The true power of education and care in transforming societies doesn't finish when a child walks out of the school gate. That's when it begins. We also care deeply about fairness in Australia. And to achieve fairness, we have to get education and care right at the beginning of a child's life. That's what the Launch Into Learning campaign stands for. So why does this campaign matter? Because the campaign objectives satisfy what I think are the 4 key prerequisites for significant society-changing social reform in this country. Firstly, it satisfies the ethical and moral imperative. Children do not get to choose their parents. They do not get to choose the communities into which they are born. The family into which they are born is the lottery of life. So as a liberal democracy here in Australia, we have a responsibility to level that playing field. Not at school, but it's got to start in early childhood. Secondly, there's the social imperative. We have to narrow the gap between the most privileged in this country and the least to promote and to maintain what we value so much, which is social and economic mobility in this country, and to avoid deepening social segregation, and early childhood is best placed to achieve that. Thirdly, there's the educational imperative. Children perform better at school, as Stacey's outlined the research behind, when they have experienced high quality early childhood education and care, especially in those last 2 years before they start school. And fourthly, the economic imperative. There are significant economic benefits both from a workforce participation perspective as well as economic benefits from improved performance in education. Early childhood is the most efficient and most effective method for taxpayers' money to be spent in order to achieve that. We can't leave the economic argument out of development and the campaigns around social policy. That's why early childhood education and care reform, that is the provision of free early childhood education and care for 3 and 4-year-olds for at least 2 days a week, is the next great social policy reform in Australia. So why is the time right now? In the last decade, we saw the delivery of 2 profound social policy reforms: needs-based school funding and the NDIS, both very complicated, expensive, and politically difficult. Both were complex but essential social policy reforms in this country and investments made in the national interest. And they all satisfied the 4 imperatives I mentioned earlier. As governments consider where best to invest next into social policy, in order to again achieve those imperatives, all of the indicators point to this reform of early childhood education and care that this campaign is all about. It is the easiest case to make to the public, and indeed is the easiest case to make to Treasury. While very few people in this room would doubt the legitimacy of this proposition, achieving it in the political context is not easy. It requires cooperation across layers of government and across the political divide, and it needs to be embraced and understood by not just parents, but by the public at large. It must be a campaign championed by parents and by the broader public. Again, that is a large element of what the Launch into Learning campaign is about. From my experience inside government, there are plenty of political and policy challenges. Of the sector, and it's often not the same perspective. But I think we're getting closer to a resolution to that problem. But there are indeed, of course, opportunities. Early childhood resonates with voters. It's a major cost of living issue. A lot of people are engaged in early childhood. 11% of voters have a child aged between 0 and 5, and most of them are in an early childhood setting. And in those early childhood settings is where teachers and staff get to interact with them. They eyeball them every day and have the opportunity to convince them of the merits of early childhood and the expansion of its delivery. We know that it's becoming, people are becoming increasingly aware about the impact on future education, as Stacey outlined some of the statistics around the impact that it has on NAPLAN and other educational measures. So what can we learn from potentially a couple of those other social policy reforms that early childhood can learn from? The Gonski report had a clear roadmap forward. It had a committed Commonwealth. It had some committed partners, and I say some committed partners, who avoided the temptation of using it as wedge politics as a path to power. We need those same kinds of advocates in this campaign as well. And we had partners who were willing to compromise. And we had some significant funding, which often clears some of those regulatory pathways. Why has the NDS largely worked? Again, good policy embraced by the community. The public understood the merits of it. And again, committed parties at a Commonwealth or state level and from advocates. So how do we get there? Again, as I say, we need to make not just the policy argument, but you have to make the economic argument to government, to state and Commonwealth governments, to expenditure review committees, to treasurers and finance ministers. I don't know that education ministers need to be convinced about the merits of this. But when they go and sit in that expenditure review committee, where you have to make the case to government, give us hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, because this is actually a better way of spending money than the other alternatives. They're the people that you have to convince, and it's not always easy. We need to have patience. Patience, especially around social policy reform. People want to see outcomes in 2 years, whether it's in early childhood, whether it's in health, or whether it's in education. People understand that infrastructure takes time. The North West Rail link to the northwest of Sydney, it's an 8 or 9 year project, and probably spent already $6 or $7 billion in 6 years. Not a single passenger has travelled on that train. Now, no one is suggesting that we should abandon that project because it's been a failure, because it's not transported a single passenger. People understand that with infrastructure, that patience, but not the same kind of patience that they have with social policy reform. So we need that patience. We need to explain to people why they need to be patient. Again, we need a committed Commonwealth. We need public awareness. We need the right timing, and finally, we need some luck. And the luck often is to have the right advocates in the right places at the right time. The timing is right. There are with the Commonwealth election and a big state election coming up in a month's time. What the federal Labor government has done, I think, is certainly a step in the right direction. Committing to fund 3 and 4 year olds for 2 days a week or increasing funding is a significant step in the right direction. Getting further certainty, getting away from these yearly extensions of the national partnerships. And what you want as service providers is that certainty, and what state and territory governments want is that kind of certainty as well. So I think what they've done is a great step in the right direction. So I am optimistic. I think the timing is right for the reform, and the timing is right for the launch of this campaign. We do have a federal budget that is in reasonable shape for this kind of social policy reform. I had to change the word reasonable a few times. I had good shape there, and I changed it to reasonable. But you know, I've said this before, budgets are moral documents. They're moral documents. They say what you think this country should be about. And even though you might be running deficits, or you might have a deficit, you still have to make moral decisions in the way you spend your budget. And every government should look at their budget as a moral document to see what we as a country stand for, and the representatives of the country stand for. And we have a public more aware than ever about the power of education and the social dangers of growing inequality. We also have the opportunity to leverage existing social policy reform. Having changed the fundamental equity basis upon which schools in Australia are funded through the Gonski reforms, would we not significantly leverage those dollars by a further investment in the early years? It would allow the Gonski dollars to be used even more effectively in schools when children start school with greater social and educational capabilities. Ask any primary school principal how we can best support the work they do, and the answer usually is invest in early childhood. And finally, we have a unified voice coming from the early childhood sector, rallying providers, parents, and the public to the virtues of this cause, evidenced by today's launch. Thank you very much.
For both of you to start the ball rolling, then I'll move to the floor. So, Stacey, let me start with you. You mentioned several times through your address the Front Project. I suspect everyone in the room knows a bit about it, but our viewers wouldn't. So, and if I understand it, particularly involved in engaging the business sector, that's one of the ones. Maybe that's the primary one, I'm not sure. But perhaps you can tell us a bit more about it.
Absolutely. The Front Project is an independent national organisation that's working to build a really high quality and exceptional early childhood sector and working with all of the allies that we need to do that. So engaging with business is a core part of what we do, because business leaders really see the rationale and the need for this investment. They're demanding a workforce with the skills that they need. I sat next to an engineer on the plane on the way up here who was reading my speech over my shoulder, and then started telling me about how what they need in engineering are problem solvers, are people who don't just follow the process, but actually question why and look differently at issues. They can't innovate without that. He was talking about having a real lack of innovators in his organisation. And you could absolutely see why early childhood education was a critical pathway in order to delivering that workforce.
Just to follow up, is this, I'm thinking particularly in terms of the importance of the business sector in all of this, is this almost an acknowledgement and admission that no matter what government does, it's never really going to be enough? And indeed, perhaps there should always be more involvement. Obviously, stakeholders more generally are important, but I'm particularly interested in how you engage the business sector to really help drive this focus.
They're often really captivated by the story of the brain science and the absolutely fascinating discoveries that our neuroscientists are making about how our brain works, which is a really great way of sort of engaging them in that conversation and helping them think about why an investment in early childhood education is relevant to their work.
Let me come to Adrian. You talked about the things that need to be done, but I'm just wondering, as a former politician, is there a nerve there that you can really target to get people to listen and act? Because it seems to me we live in an era of short-termism. Short-term leadership, for the sake in politics, have become the norm. And to convince people that we need an investment now to produce a social outcome well down the track, which will convert to an economic outcome, in fact, is a hard sell in some ways. Conceptually we can see it, but how do you get them to embrace it and actually run with it?
One of the challenges in the past has been, particularly in early childhood, the different messages that you hear from early childhood. So if you try to do, so from a government perspective, you don't want to be doing things and find it become a political negative. And where the difficulty's been is, if you want to do something in preschools, then the long daycare sector gets upset, or if it's something in the non-for-profit sector gets upset. And that's not an excuse for governments not to do things, but the governments become reticent to do things. They don't want to go and do stuff and spend money, make investment, and they become a negative. So in a way, where you get the most receptive government is when you can, in as much as possible, assure them that there are going to be good policy outcomes, but that there are going to be good political outcomes as well.
Well, let me just one more follow-up question to both of you then. If we agree that having preschoolers do 2 years of preschool education, if you like, we've got a mixed system around the country. It's a hybrid system, really, different in different jurisdictions. Should we just say that 3 and 4 year olds should go into the public education centres?
Well, you can say that, but you probably
that's not what I'm
upset a few people with this room.
I understand that, but at the end of the day, is this all about a consistent, common education policy? Or can we actually get as good, if not a better result, through the hybrid approach?
Well, there's no reason why you can't have a multiplicity of providers. When schools do it, there's 3 sectors, and they've managed the school funding model, and it's not perfect by any measure, but it's a vast improvement to what it was 7 or 8 years ago. So you can do it across it with different types of providers. But you've got to do it uniformly. You've got to do it uniformly, and to do it uniformly across Australia is a little bit different. Is a little bit difficult. But that's where the Commonwealth comes in and says, here's a big lump of money. We'll buy reform. Essentially, you have to buy reform, and which is what the Gonski reforms did as well. It changed actually the way most states, and indeed the Catholic system, eventually, the way they actually fund their schools. They weren't going to do it without the lump of money on top. Money does make quite a few problems go away.
So you add anything to that?
So I would say that what matters most is the experience that a child has when they walk into a centre, and it's the quality of that experience, the relationship that they have with their educators, with the quality of the teaching that they experience. And it doesn't matter who's providing that environment as long as the experience that a child has is excellent and is really helping them to progress.
Okay, I'd like to come back and ask you a bit more about disadvantaged children. Let me go to the floor now. Simon Gross.
Simon Gross, Canberra IQ. You talked about a beautiful idea, but I'd like to invite you to dig down a bit into the content and the nuts and bolts that you're proposing. In the context of that is I've done a bit of research on the Finnish system, the global gold standard. Finnish kids don't go to school till they're 7 and not taught reading until they're 7. They have compulsory preschool from 6, but 2016 figures, 68% of 1 in 6-year-olds in Finland were going to some early education. But the emphasis that they make is on play, not education. But you both talked about preschool education, early education. What you're proposing, the kind of curriculum or programs you're proposing, how would you see the mix between play and education?
Well, I'll go first. To say that you're exactly right. I was told from the very beginning, probably Elizabeth, that early childhood is not about pushing down school-based curriculum into early childhood. Absolutely not. And I think what they do in Finland is, I mean, you could do essentially what they do there here, in the sense that you could make kindergarten and year 1, or prep in the various other states, kindergarten and year 1 less around structured education and look more like early childhood and less like school. So actually, you don't even need to change the structure of the way we deliver schools. You actually just have to change the way we deliver it. So you could actually get more towards that kind of approach. And I think Stacey can talk about this, about what the research is saying about the value of play-based learning when you're younger and the benefit it has beyond your years.
Because play is education. It's while children are playing that they are learning all of those core skills. It's when they're building a castle out of blocks, they're developing their fine motor skills, they've got an educator helping them test and experiment and see whether building it this way or this way is more stable. Another child comes along and wants to play as well and help build the castle. They're learning how to interact, how to collaborate, how to manage it when the other child wants to build something that they don't want to build, how to stay calm and work that out collaboratively. So in that play is all of those foundational educational skill building moments that we need. And it's really skilled early childhood educators who create those opportunities and extend the learning that's going on moment for moment for each of the children.
Play is also, I presume, a way of really engaging kids. They want to play, they want to get on and do these things and learn in the process effectively.
Absolutely, and great early childhood education is built around the way that young children learn best, which is lots of play and exploration. It's why they're investigators and young scientists, because they're learning through that exploration and through that play.
The question now from Lani Scar.
Hello, Lani Scar from News Corp. I think everyone in this room understands the power of early childhood education and investing in that, and then the impact it can have on our overall educational outcomes, and that flows on to productivity and GDP growth and whatnot. But do you think, following on from Laurie's question, do you think that there is too much of a short-term focus in our nation's politics at the moment to really understand the value of this change? And will that ever change in our current political climate? And then secondly, 2020 US presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren, she has suggested that childcare, or is running on a platform of childcare being free. Do you ever see that being a possibility in Australia?
Let's get the non-cultural.
Early childhood education is absolutely an investment in the future, and it is an investment that requires that long-term vision and commitment to Australia's future. But it's absolutely an investment that we need to be making now in order to drive all of the things that all of us want for Australia in the future. And we've done it before. In 2008, I think we had about 12% of 4-year-olds who were enrolled in 15 hours of an early childhood program. We're now at 96%. We've done it before, we can absolutely do it again. In terms of the Elizabeth Warren's quite pioneering political commitments, I think we all agree that cost should never be a barrier to a child accessing early childhood education. We would never make school and access to school dependent on a parent's income or on their kind of wealth and ability to pay. And that same principle should absolutely apply to early childhood education.
Adrian, did you like to a few follow-ups?
Yeah, I mean, the problem always with the Commonwealth is 3-year terms. So if you're going to do something like this, the best time to do it is straight after you've won government, and then it gives you some time to deal with all the barnacles, isn't that the thing now? Gives you time to deal with the barnacles. But you've only got 3 years. At least in Victoria, New South Wales, is 4 years, and you've got longer to actually sort out some of the complexities, convince people about the merits. But you're often not going to see, and journalists and others will always want to see data. Show me the data that this investment is having an effect. And usually in social policy, you can't see it in 4 years. It takes longer than that. So I don't think there's a lack of political interest in doing things long term. But as I say, particularly in early childhood, when things come up in cabinet, cabinet ministers will ask, what does the for-profit sector say about what you're proposing? What does the not-for-profit sector say? What does what do the preschool? And if you as a minister don't have a good answer, if you say, actually they're going to really stick it up about whatever we're proposing, then you're probably not likely to get it over the line. So, in a way, my advice to the sector is kind of clear that decision pathway for politicians, so it's a no-brainer. Because politically, publicly, the parents and the community and the business sector, they know the importance of this, but at the moment there's just a few too many obstacles. There's a lot of complexity, there's different sectors, there's states, and you've got to clear that pathway is the best way to get it through.
Politics, yes. Tim Shaw.
Thanks, Laurie. Tim Shaw from Radio 2CC here in Canberra and a member of the Press Club Board. We had 3 daughters under the age of 4. And they were climbing out the window to get to preschool and to play school. Do either of you care where this 2-year program is conducted? And let me ask you to understand this. Kate Ellis, Shadow Minister for Early Education, was in this very room, and she said how fabulous it would be, the real estate that is used for our primary schools and some mixed schools right around the country are the perfect location for this kind of early preschool. Now that's going to upset some of the private sector because the government's going to say we're spending state and federal money, let's be able to measure the metric, let's see it happening, let's bring in those university educated people that we've spoken about, because this is not $20 an hour childcare work. This is an educated individual delivering these services. Do you care about location? Second question. For me in remote Australia, I don't have access to these beautiful coloured place group areas. What alternatives have you got on your modelling to provide online services, allowing those mums and dads in regional and remote communities to be able to adopt your modelling? Your thoughts on those points?
Would you like to kick off on that?
Thanks.
So what I care about is that every child attends a high quality service in their local community in a way that is accessible to them, and that regardless of what service they walk into, the teaching is excellent, there's wonderful relationships between the services and the families, that it's a great environment for children to thrive in. That is the most important thing. And making sure that we deliver that as a system is a really huge priority for Australia.
And I don't mind either. There are benefits of having it on a primary school site, and there are benefits of not having it on primary school sites. For some communities for some parents who didn't have a great experience at school, you know, the cultural issues. You know, most people in this room use our institutions. For many people in Australia, institutions have used them, so they're not particularly comfortable with them. So making sure it's an environment where people are happy to enter, I think is important. But on school sites does make sense. But the other thing here is this salary differential between teachers. We've got to get to that. Again, there's got to be some kind of pathway to get to that, that salary equalisation. Because also what you want there is primary school teachers having experience in early childhood and early childhood teachers having experience in primary school. The big issues we have in education are these transition points when you go from early childhood to primary, from primary to high school, even from year to year. But this particular one, early childhood, if teachers in primary understood more about the values of play-based learning, I think that would do education a big favour. And then even early childhood teachers experiencing primary school and understanding then what they have to deal with as you go through primary school would actually do the children probably the biggest service possible.
Online?
So you're absolutely right that making sure that kids in rural and regional Australia can access a really high quality early childhood education. For that 60,000 kids who are developmentally vulnerable when they start school, a big proportion of those come from regional and remote Australia. Online is tricky in early childhood education because so much of the power of the teaching is in the moment-to-moment interactions between the educator and the child, and replicating that online is really complex. I think a better solution is to grow early childhood educators in those communities, to train them up to be really skilled, qualified and effective teachers. And pay them exactly. And
what I'd say about online is that coming from Western New South Wales is it's often the answer for regional communities. You know, we'll deliver it online. And these remote communities, actually what you need is face-to-face. You could actually probably deliver it in Neutral Bay online effectively. You'd actually the opposite way around. It's not the solution for out there. It's probably the solution for Neutral Bay and Woollahra. It's not the solution in Hay and Uavalon West. It's face-to-face because they're often the most disadvantaged communities.
Question now from John Miller.
Thank you, Laurie, and thank you, John Miller, freelance, and thank you, Dr. Fox and Professor Piccoli, for your very insightful addresses. Yesterday, this forum, Tanya Plibersek addressed the problem of the shortage of teachers and the high attrition rates in the profession in general. Now, this was partly attributable to poor promotion opportunities and relatively poor rates of pay. Given these problems in the teaching service in general, and the even lower numbers and rewards in the early childhood sector already, how do you intend to double their numbers?
There's a piece of work that we're doing at the Front Project with one of our sister organisations, Future Tracks, which is about changing the perception of early childhood teaching. There was some market research that we did that with young people, the perception was that it was hard work, poorly paid, lots of germs, and people weren't aware of the extraordinary power that early childhood educators have to change the entire life of a child, to build their brains from the bottom up, to make a really lasting and sustained difference. And we found that when you started to talk to young people about what an extraordinary job and all of the opportunities that sit in early childhood education, they were much more interested in pursuing it as a career. And the part of what the Future Tracks program will do is pair the students with mentors. So all throughout their university degree, they'll have expert mentors to help grow them as wonderful teachers. They'll have the opportunity to work while they're studying, so they'll develop those skills that they need to be fantastic. And this investment will help contribute to a next generation of exceptional teachers.
Well, I think talking to teachers, the thing they love doing is actually dealing with the children. The problem with the job is dealing with the adults. I'm not joking. That is generally the feedback. It doesn't matter how disadvantaged or difficult the school is with children. It's actually dealing with the children is what they love. It's the colleagues or the bureaucracy or parents is what makes the job challenging. So one of the things, I take some blame here because I was a minister for 6 years and didn't do enough about it. But he's reducing some of that administrative burden on teachers, getting away from some of that adult-to-adult stuff, so they can focus on their job with children, and that's how you make the job more satisfying. I mean, I'm a recovering lawyer, and the attrition rate for lawyers in the first 5 years is probably just as much, and probably for very similar reasons. They're not easy jobs. It's not easy to be a school teacher, having to deal with 18, 20, 30 individuals in a classroom. But I think even this issue about salaries, when we talk about how do you get teachers into the harder staffed parts of New South Wales, which is one of my great interests, given where I live, you can pay more, or you can think of the investment. You pay more, or do you make the job more satisfying? And we want to do more work about which one actually makes the job more attractive. To come to Lake Cargelligo and be a school teacher, do you want to be paid more? Does that make it more attractive? Or does it make it actually more attractive if it's a more enjoyable job? And you can invest in both of those. It's a question of working out which one's the most effective. Because we have a distribution problem in teaching in early childhood. I don't think is any different. In the inner west of Sydney or in here, 3 blocks. The 3 blocks around here, you'll get 50 applicants for a vacancy, but you go to Yass and you might have no applicants.
Early childhood educators do some of the most complex, sophisticated, extraordinarily important work out there, and they don't get the recognition, both in the community or through paying conditions that they deserve.
So I reckon one of the really great things is, and this is where schools can learn a lot, is as a parent, you get these emails with a picture of your child, child building the thing and what they learned and how it fits in with all the early years learning framework, etc., etc. Wow, I forgot from a parent engagement perspective, and the parents understanding what's going on at school. If schools could do that, but it's a time piece.
Peter Lewis.
Peter Lewis, Essential Media. Thank you, Adrian. One of your interesting observations was that the great social reforms require bipartisanship. I think everyone thinks they understand how body contact politics works and the contest of politics works. So I'm interested in your reflections, having lived through Gonski, about how bipartisan politics works.
Well, it's an interesting question because it certainly wasn't bipartisan at a Commonwealth level, but it was bipartisan between a federal Labor government and the largest state in New South Wales, which was a Conservative government at the time. And in that sense, it was bipartisan. And it surprised people, it surprised the general public. And you know what? The general public really liked it. They really liked it. Everywhere I went, people said, they didn't understand necessarily the detail, but what they liked was the fact that the two separate political parties came together on important social policy, and that actually helped to actually solidify the public support for the reform. There was very strong opposition from the Abbott opposition at the time, and Barrel was under enormous pressure. But all that did actually was, I think, improve the politics. And I say improve the politics because it's good policy, but when good policy is good politics is when you have the perfect combination, and that's when government's going to do things. When politicians, some might doubt this, but are human. Gamble's here, a former minister from New South Wales. Human beings who want to do the right thing and progress our country, but might have different views about it. So they want to do good policy, but it's also got to hopefully get you re-elected. So when you have those two things together, is when it becomes most powerful.
Ken Randall.
Today we've got your launch. Yesterday we had the Shadow Minister for Education with a fairly heavy emphasis on public school education. Next week we've got the universities. Do you really think that the education debate is practical along those lines, or do you think they're self-reinforcing, particularly given the way you describe some of the political problems they do?
Oh no, I think they're self-reinforcing, and I think why the time is right in early childhood is because there has been significant reform around education, and there is more, but those big reforms around, particularly funding. I mean, no one should underestimate how significant that is to get the three sectors across the whole country to change the way they fund schools. I mean, somebody said to me, they were surprised that previously they weren't equitably funded. And then in the education sector, we've had demand-driven placements for universities. uncapped university places, significant reforms in higher education as well. Where we haven't really had this significant reform, especially backed by significant amounts of money, is in early childhood. And as Stacey said in her remarks at the beginning, that's where you get the foundations right. And as I said, that's actually how you leverage the spending in schools and how you leverage the spending in universities as well. From a national perspective, it makes complete sense to do that.
I'll go back to Simon Gross.
Just on the Gonski funding, I think it relates back to, well, I reminded Paul Keating saying you don't want to get in between a state premier and a bucket of money. Probably the same with the state opposition leader and a bucket of money. But just going to, you're saying this 2 years should be provided. Do you think it should be mandatory? And if it was mandatory, like vaccination, would you allow opt-outs?
I, as Adrian Piccoli, don't think it should be mandatory. Parents that I've spoken to, I had this conversation with lots of parents before about should it be mandatory. Parents don't want it to be mandatory. I mean, we are talking 15 hours a week here, not 5 days a week. It's not school. So no, I don't think it should be mandatory. But it should become culturally the thing you do. That's kind of what it's got to become as well. I don't think in any other jurisdiction it's mandatory. But it is the thing to do. It's the thing you do in the Scandinavian countries. You send your children to a quality early childhood provider, and that's what you do. It should be free if you need it to be free. And I'm not suggesting that people shouldn't also pay additional if they want to pay additional. That's up to them. It's in the same way at school. If you want to pay additional, you can. But if you need it to be free, it's free and available.
Stacey, the last couple of questions have gone to Adrian, so I'm going to ask the final one today of you. That disadvantaged group that we talk about, who, in terms of at least some percentage of them virtually inevitably set back from the outset to be not achieve what they're capable of. Is there a need for a more targeted approach to deal with that group? We tend to talk from a global perspective, more targeted approach, and if there is, what would it actually look like? What could and what should we do?
So I think there are children across the entire community who experience developmental vulnerability and need assistance, and all children can benefit from great early childhood education. So I believe we absolutely need a universal approach to providing early childhood education. But within that, there are some children who have a greater level of need, who need extra support, who need extra resources, who might need extra time, and they should absolutely receive that. It should be built into the system, that all children can access it and children get what they need in order to thrive. We've got good models of what that looks like around the world. We do it in the maternal child health system. Everyone in Victoria gets 8 visits. The kids who are really struggling and the families who are really struggling get closer to 15. It's a really established model in the health system and other parts of the way that we deliver services. It's absolutely what we should be doing for children. And it's really clear that the children who have the greatest needs need extra resources, need extra support, and need the highest levels of quality that we can give them.
We will finish on that point. Dr. Fox, Professor Piccoli, thank you very much for your time today. Thanks as well to the Early Learning and Care Council of Australia, and good luck with the campaign.